Okay, here we go. This is Mark in New York. You think you have a reason to think that God exists?
Yes. How are you, gentlemen?
Doing pretty good. Looking forward to hearing this reason. I hope it's a good one.
Good and godless.
Good, man. Yeah, no, I just actually started tuning in about 10, 15 minutes ago when you were on the tail end of a conversation, I think it was 2 calls ago, with the gentleman there about cosmology and the Big Bang. So I kind of wanted to pick up on that thread, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
Sure. I'm sure you guys are very familiar in the chat with the one of the ancient arguments, the kalam cosmological argument.
Yes, the argument that doesn't get you to God, and that modern quantum mechanics kind of blows apart. Yeah, we're familiar with that one.
The new Coke of the first cause argument that everyone got real excited about, but it has a bad taste.
Right.
Yeah.
That one. Yeah, we're familiar.
Well, you're right. It doesn't get you to God. It gets you to the cause of the universe, and then you have to do a separate analysis as to what that is. And so, I don't think it's a shortcoming of the argument, because it's a modest argument, and I think that's actually a strength.
Except that quantum mechanics has shown that things do happen for no reason.
Well,
it breaks the argument right there. Right?
No, I actually I disagree with that, because I would offer 2 responses to that. Number one, if you're talking about like the decay of a particle as a result of quantum mechanics, it's not happening for no reason. It's happening because of the laws of physics.
No, actually, they have shown that particles pop into and out of existence for no particular reason at all, and that they don't need a reason to pop in and out of existence. These are nothing happens that's not. Are you saying it's not consistent with the laws of physics? I'm saying it's consistent with the laws of quantum mechanics, which dictate that particles pop into and out of existence without any cause. Yes.
It's sort of like we've gone beyond like the Newtonian, I can observe a tennis ball bouncing and measure every part of it, and then say I'm a physicist and then calculate an equation that requires it to be smooth and there be no friction and wind. But trying to understand things at the quantum level, after being able to understand things you can easily observe, is like trying to understand how a television show works if you can't look behind the scenes. So when we get down to the quantum level, the level beyond basically anything that we interact with, it really is crazy what the findings show. It doesn't work like anything that we know, because we ain't quantum people, yo. Right? So, I'm 6'1".
There are experiments that show that the cause for a phenomena is sometimes in the future and not in the past, like you would think. Quantum physics gets very, very weird very, very quickly. You can go look at the experiments and go look at the data. It's amazing what they're doing with quantum. And we don't know how what happens at the quantum mechanical level percolates up into the normal universe, so to speak, and what we normally think of in terms of the laws of physics. So,
okay, well, like I don't want to get bogged down on this particular point, because there's a version of the kalam that is more modest, where it actually the quantum example is not an objection, because it's a more modest version of the kalam. It's not, because the traditional kalam is everything that begins to exist has a cause, and there's
except the universe.
More modest version.
Yeah.
Right, but there's a more modest version of it, where I think the first premise is, if the universe has a cause, it's basically, I don't have it in front of me, but it's a more modest version, because William Lane Craig is, this is obvious.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with all of his versions, and they all run into the same problem. In fact, there's a really good set of YouTube videos done by actual physicists refuting everything he says. Yeah. And then, of course, there's that really, really great moment in his debate with Sean Carroll, where Sean Carroll puts up a photo of the physicist that William Lane Craig likes to quote, saying you can't come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
Basically saying that William Lane Craig's is incorrect. And so, yeah, I mean, William Lane Craig, I'm sure he's a great brain, but when it comes to science, I think he's slightly less out of depth than myself or Jamie here, but he's still completely out of his depth.
Okay, so
drawing wide conclusions about the fundamental aspects of the universe outside of experimental data, for me, it's sort of like, okay, well, if you can't get there with a mathematic proof, right, and you can't get there with evidence that suggests directly this point, and you don't spend your time asking and seeking an answer that you might never get by doing math and like trying to observe the universe, and you're just trying to put it together logically. For me, I'd put that logic question together, and then I'd go find someone who does do those things and ask them, right? Like that time that I thought, hey, what if the properties of matter that get lost when matter falls into a black hole are related to dark matter? And I had no way of answering that. And it was in my mind, and I was like, okay, well, I can't write a handwritten letter to someone. And then eventually, I bumped into a cosmologist. I asked him that, and he was like, oh, no, that's an interesting thought, but actually from the math, we can tell that it's a different thing. And then I learned from it. But the statement, thank goodness that I drink way too much energy drink, otherwise I would have spilled something everywhere. The thing that I would do is say, okay, well, here's an interesting thought, here's an interesting question, but I wouldn't conclude, oh, okay, this is a good reason to come to the conclusion that there's an all-powerful force or that there's a particular meaning in this incredibly large existence that relates to me, because I don't have any good evidence for it. I don't have a blank plus blank equals blank, either in evidence or in math, to suggest something beyond what cosmologists who can explain things I can't explain would explain. Right. I don't know more than people that spend all of their time understanding the evidence know.
Yeah. So I mean, even if we grant, for the sake of argument, okay, the kalam sort of kind of makes sense, right? We grant that. How do you get to a God from there? You can't get to a God from there, right? Because all you have is the universe began, and then all of a sudden you leap to some sort of God. And this is, again, I said it before on that other call, right? This is where atheists and theists depart. Atheists and theists agree we don't know, but theists add in this, therefore God. And every argument I've seen that builds on top of the kalam is simply asserting things with no evidence. At least with the kalam, we have some evidence, right? I mean, if you don't understand quantum physics, the kalam makes perfect sense.
Well, okay.
Yeah, no,
so
but
let him go.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was a video put out this week by William Lane Craig and Stephen Meyer. Stephen Meyer has a PhD in the philosophy of religion from Cambridge, and he was a scientist before that, so he's very well steeped in the physics. They were both on a panel, and I'm just mentioning it because I think you guys understand the issue like very, very well, and I think you would benefit from listening to it. I
have never benefited from listening to William Lane Craig, so I will go ahead and listen to it just to be complete. No, I find him to be more insufferably arrogant than I am, and that is saying something, because I know people will tell you I'm the most insufferably arrogant person they know, even though I try not to be, but it does happen. But yeah, I don't find it to be useful at all, or find it useful.
You don't learn things from people if you find them arrogant?
No, I'm willing to learn anything from anybody, but he doesn't say anything worth listening to, right? Because he's here's and I had a different opinion before. William Lane Craig said that the reason that he believed was none of the things that he says, right? None of his arguments convinced him to believe in God. What convinced him to believe in God was realizing that somebody loved him, right? You listen to that thing and it's like, okay, therefore, none of these arguments should work on me either. I should just accept his personal experience, and that doesn't work for me either. So yeah, if his arguments weren't convincing to him, why should they be convincing to me or you?
I think what he means is that absent his personal belief, that I think he's kind of speculating like the arguments wouldn't convince him, but he does have the personal belief. And when you combine the two,
I think what Jim is pointing out is that he believed, and in part of his in his part of his ministry, he has created this presentation and these arguments. And for a lot of people, particularly if part of the reason that a person believes and is persuaded is a feeling or a paralysis experience, and they then turn around and say, you should be persuaded to believe what I believe for this other reason on a chalkboard. Okay, maybe, but it's sort of like, okay, well, why did you write this on a chalkboard and go to science and cosmology and quote people that say, hey, stop quoting me this way, you're misquoting me? I think that definitely gives a lot of people the impression that, okay, well, if you're willing to quote things, I don't want to say wrong, but wrong, and just say, oh, I'm quoting this guy, this is what he believes, even though he disagrees, it gives me every impression that I shouldn't spend my time listening to a minute of William Lane Craig and then pausing so that I can check every claim that he's made, because he's demonstrated a type of disregard for the work of the scientists that he's quoting.
Right. No, I hear you. I would like to respond to something that Jim said, which is he referenced the debate with Sean Carroll. I watched that debate, and I know that the part of the debate that you're talking about, where Sean Carroll says he.
You're losing volume here on us. Oh, there you go.
Okay, so there was the part of the debate that Sean Carroll said that he emailed Alexander Vilenkin about the Borguth-Vilenkin theorem, and that it sort of was like a refutation to Bill Craig.
Yes.
Bill Craig subsequently reached out to Alexander Vilenkin and had extensive discussions with him about that issue. I'm not going to get into it here, but I think you would. I think I understand like the personality thing, and people can come across like grating, and that's you know, that gets in the way. But I think you would learn, because that's something like it sounds like you're very like knowledgeable about the subject, and yes, they're coming from the theistic perspective, but they do have something to offer.
Right, and I do listen. Like I said, I'll go and listen to this, even though I'm not a big William Lane Craig fan. But when the guy says that this didn't convince him, not only that, but that we should lower our bar of evidence, well, I mean, he comes off like a used car salesman when he does stuff like that. But I'm going to give you the last word, and then we're going to move on to the next caller. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would just say that, just as the last word, I would just say that personally, I don't believe in God because of these arguments as standalone arguments. Like the analogy that I would make is, because you reference like we don't have evidence. I think the best analogy is, what evidence do you have that someone loves you? It could be your wife or somebody like that.
Their actions.
What evidence do you have that the person loves you?
Their actions.
You're never going to have. I'm sorry?
Their actions.
What they do.
Their actions, but that's not definitive. That's not something that you could be fooled. The person could not love you, and you could be interpreting their actions as them loving you.
Yeah.
So there's an element
before, but part of the point is we have that evidence. I can interact definitively with my aunt, and I can tell you, oh, my aunt loves me. These are the things. And sure, 99% sure is pretty much as sure as I'm ever willing to let myself say, oh, yeah, I believe this with 99% certainty, because I say, hey, that maybe there's things I don't know. Maybe she's, you know, an Illuminati plant and part of a conspiracy, or maybe she's just putting on, you know, two faces. But until I have good evidence to go, oh, no, my aunt hates me, or oh, no, my aunt doesn't love me, I'm not going to believe that she doesn't until I have good evidence. And I'm also not going to believe that my aunt loves me if I have no evidence that my aunt exists.
You have faith because you have reason to believe. You have reason to believe that the proposition is true.
Which is a belief, not faith.
That's the most you're ever going to have. You're never going to have.
That's not faith.
Yeah. Right? It's not a mathematical proof.
No, we're not asking for mathematical proofs.
Yeah,
we're not asking for mathematical proofs, right?
And what we're saying is the evidence isn't enough.
For evidence? Convincing evidence.
Yeah.
Right? You can't go to the Bible.
What evidence would it take?
Not
what
a problem.
What evidence would it take, though?
I don't know.
For which
what
particular
God?
God?
What evidence would it take to convince you?
I don't know.
If you don't know, then it's not falsifiable. Then you're basically saying I can't falsify.
No, what he's no. What he's describing is himself and what would or wouldn't cause him to believe,
right?
Not what the universe is or what could be provided. So if you ask me how I'm feeling and I tell you, you can try and persuade me that I'm wrong, but we're still both talking about me. And when you asked him what would cause him to believe, and he said, you know what, I don't know what would cause me to believe. You saying, oh, well, then that's evidence that you should believe, or that's evidence that other people would, should take to disregard what he says or to believe in God. I don't see it. What I see is you going, well, if you don't know what would persuade you to believe, then how am I supposed to persuade you? I don't know, man. At this point, I've spent a long time looking at this. My heart is open, my mind is open, but nothing that I see and nothing that's been presented to me. And people have gone out of their way, been really creative. There's cosmological arguments here. For thousands of years, they've been presenting arguments. For hundreds of years, they've been collecting scientific data. Right now, you can find Christian and Muslim apologists making this argument and that argument. More people than one, have used more creativity than I have to come up with every argument and every collection of evidence to demonstrate this to me. They've thought of things that I wouldn't have thought of initially, but nothing that they've presented to me, argument or evidence-wise, has persuaded me. That's the situation it is. We're at the point where I can't even imagine an argument or something that they could find that is within the realm of like, oh yeah, someone could find a bone or whatever. Nothing like that I can think of right now without prompting would persuade me. And that's because everything that they can find, every argument that they can think of, every bit of dust or evidence that they can present, they've found so far. So I'll wait here and I'll be open, and if they find something completely new, I'll look at it. And if they present a new argument, I'll listen to it. But man, they've been working at it so hard, I can't even imagine what they're gonna come up with next. So forgive me for failing to imagine something super special, but I'm pretty sure that if there's an all-powerful being that wants me to know that that all-powerful being exists, that can commune with me and that has a personal interest in my life, that being knows how to persuade me. So why doesn't he?
Well, he doesn't because it has to be a free choice. If, of course, God could, if God exists, right?
It has to be a free choice for me to believe, or it has to be a free choice for me to be willing to believe? Because I made that free choice, and I believed, and then I asked, the teacher, God, to grade my homework, and I realized that I was scribbling on a piece of paper and I couldn't find what a classroom was. Basically, when I looked around and tried to find the evidence of God or the argument that was going to persuade me to still be a believer, I looked. It was a free choice. I looked around and I don't see anything. Additionally, it wasn't a free choice for every character in the Bible, forgive me for assuming Christian, but for every character in the Bible that saw God or that saw a pillar of salt or saw a pillar of smoke or saw fire, that is something that happened in front of them that wasn't their friend or their neighbor or a caller saying, well, you should believe, choose to believe.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I respect what you said. I mean, if you're keeping an open mind, I think that's all you could do. And, it comes to us at different points in our lives. You guys both seem actually pretty young guys. And so you have the rest of your lives ahead of you where you never know, and it's like my beliefs might change. Right now, I think God exists, and it's possible that might change down the road. I think all we could do is try to be intellectually honest with ourselves. Mm-hmm. Be willing to learn from other people. That's why I like actually calling into the show to challenge my beliefs. And so I think we benefit from these conversations. And that's really all we could do.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for reiterating a large part of what we believe here at the ACA. And I can really respect that. Yep. I really respect the openness, the calling in. It makes it hard to make a snarky joke. I'm looking for one. But yeah. I can really respect that, and I'm keeping an open mind as well, but I don't see it, man.
Yep. But you call in if you got a better argument.
Yeah, call in. I am often lazy, so if you find something that you think I haven't heard, bring it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, bring it in a friendly sense rather than like...
Thanks, Mark.